We've got at least one request to speak on this issue. Mr. Zuckerman.
Is this on?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to be brief and not comprehensive in my skepticism or criticisms, but I wanted to alert you just to be thinking about a couple of things as you go forward. One, on this governance issue, I haven't read the 55-page document since the day it came out, but I was very confused as to where the ultimate controls in decision-making were in that, and it was convoluted and confusing, and I think the concerns that you are raising here are legitimate, because that is the proof of the pudding, is that regardless of what kind of mechanisms are set up, if there isn't somebody sitting there willing to enforce them, they don't mean much. And we have some experience with that. I mean, we sit here today, we know that the standards by which the projects are supposed to be operating, their export projects, they're in violation of those. And this has been a continuous experience that we've had over many years, and there's a lot of reluctance on the part of the agencies that are supposed to be enforcing their own standards to get in and do this sort of thing. So I think you need to look closely at that. The other thing I wanted to suggest to you is that the description of the legal requirements of all this obviously are complicated. And I think you're going to be relying heavily upon counsel as time goes on in those areas. My concern is that, to the best of my recollection, the Department of Fish and Game is represented by the Department of Justice, by the Attorney General's office, as are you. And I think you ought to be giving some thought to having either your own separate counsel to rely upon in that process, or suggesting that maybe Fish and Game should, one or the other. But to have the same office representing both sides raises some serious questions about the objectivity that this agency, this council, could have in handling an appeal or any other issue that related to the BDCP that would come before it.
Mr. Stevens.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that point. And we have thought about that, and that's an issue that comes up with regard to complex multi-agency projects, not only this one. And we have talked to the Attorney General about segregating its assignment well, you shrug, but I think it's important, and we have thought about it. So objectivity, compliance with our potential roles that are laid out in the Delta Reform Act are forefront in my mind and the minds of the council members. So it's an issue that we've looked at, and we'll make sure that we do the right thing.
And the fact that we've hired independent outside counsel for purposes of the Delta Plan.
Well, we've hired Arcadis, as you know, that's separate from CH2. So we're highly sensitive to potential issues, and I appreciate you bringing them up. But with regard to this one in particular, we've thought about it.
Well, there are budgetary consequences of doing something like that, and that's the reason why I raise it today, is that when you're thinking about your budgetary needs, that you might want to give that some thought. The last thing I wanted to say, which I forgot before, is that I hope that you look beyond just the nuts and bolts of this plan when it comes to you, and of the conservation measures and so forth, and really look closely at both the economic, the financial assurances that are being provided, which are required under the applicable law, and the governance aspects of it, to be able to assure yourself that the governance is going to be independent and in accordance with the law.
I would be extremely appreciative to get a Tom Zuckerman legal opinion on the range of our authority in the subjects noted. And this is a request I've made of other parties when they suggest what we should do and how we should do it, because if there is an argument for a different approach on the legal stuff, we need to have it laid out to us by parties who believe that authority exists. Not the conclusion, but the analysis, because that will allow us to think it through.
I will discuss it with an active member of the State Bar, which I am no longer. But I think it is important because the HCCP does require financial assurances, and I think the governance provides the certainty or the uncertainty as to whether the provisions are actually going to be enforced or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zuckerman.